the bombings is Frank Gaffney. Frank is founder and president of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., and their website is centerforsecuritypolicy.org, and he joins us now. Frank, Tim, and Ed, thank you for being our guest.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Tell us what you do there on a daily basis at the Center for Security Policy.
Well, I'm the president of the organization and helped found it about 25 years ago, and what we spend most of our time doing is agitating, I guess, on behalf of a sound national security policy and posture. My old boss, Ronald Reagan, called it peace through strength, and whether the adversary is, as it previously was, an ideology known as Soviet communism, or today's ideology, which is Reagan once warned, every generation faces an existential threat to freedom from this kind of operation, namely Sharia, the supremacist Islamist doctrine that animates jihad, that obligates, really, its followers to engage in jihad. Our purpose is to try to make sure the public is aware of these dangers, that those who are supposed to defend us against them are both aware of them as well, and doing the right sorts of things to protect us, and otherwise to see what we can do to ensure that our country prospers in peace and security.
Frank, your organization, again, the Center for Security Policy, was established in 1988. Now, that was still in the Cold War. It was just before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Was radical Islam on your radar at all at that point? Was it simply, I mean, we had been talking a lot about North Korea and, of course, China, both communist countries, so it still exists, Cuba, so this is still an ideology that's out there and the U.S. confronts it. But was radical Islam on your radar at all in 1988?
Well, I confess it wasn't anywhere near the center of my radar screen, that's for sure. The fact that the Russians, or then the Soviet Union, had been very actively involved for decades in promoting Arab nationalism, which was evolving at that time into the sort of early phases of the phenomenon that we now see so much in evidence in the Middle East at the moment, namely Islamist sort of aggressive behavior, was a thought and of a concern. A few years after, the founding of the center, of course, we had the further evidence that this problem was going to metastasize as the Soviet Union came apart, and some of the republics that had been associated with it went their own way, and some, like Chechnya, that were still part of Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union, wanted to go their separate way, and all of that gave rise to a whole new impetus behind this Islamist agenda, and then, of course, along came Afghanistan.
Talking to Frank Gaffney, and you can read his website at centerforsecuritypolicy.org. Frank, why did these two brothers do what they did? Why did they bomb the Boston Marathon and kill and maim those innocent people?
Well, we don't know for sure, based upon the condition of the one that's still alive. We may not know for some time. What seems fairly evident is that they were imbued with this conviction that as faithful Muslims, as Sharia-adherent Muslims, it was their obligation to engage in jihad against the infidel. And, some do it in violent ways. Some do it in what I think of as pre-violent ways, most especially the Muslim Brotherhood, with which these two were associated through a mosque that they attended in Boston called the Islamic Society of Boston, a Muslim Brotherhood Front organization. And then there are others who simply see it as their fulfillment of their duties to jihad to underwrite it. But it seems to me pretty clear from what we've seen on their Facebook pages and what we're learning from their parents and other sources, that that these guys thought killing infidels was the way to go, and did.
Infidels being, who are infidels to these people?
Well, non-Muslims, I think, is the generic descriptor.
Okay, now this is the part that I think a lot of Americans have a hard time, putting into perspective, or as they say, wrapping their head around. These two, because I heard even a Fox News psychologist the other day was being interviewed, and he said this may be associated with mental illness. And I said to myself, and I said to the TV, talking back to this guy, I said, so you're telling me that two brothers, very smart guys, no indications of mental illness, all of a sudden together have mental illness? I said, no, you're grasping for straws here. These guys knew exactly what they were doing. It was plotted and planned. They were motivated by jihad. I don't know why jihad, meaning this particular a person who buys into this jihad is a Muslim who believes that they are on a mission from Allah to kill the infidel, and it doesn't matter that they're innocent American citizens. We're non-Muslims, this country, and there are some Muslims here, but so this was to please Allah. Now, not all Muslims do that, obviously, thank God, and not all Muslims subscribe to the jihad that we're just talking about here today, but enough of them do to make the world a very dangerous place where these people pop up. So, were these guys, were both brothers mentally ill, Frank, or were they pretty smart guys?
Well, as you were suggesting at the beginning of this segment, the disappointment that they turned out to be Caucasians, all right, but not quite what the left had in mind, it was replaced by this frantic effort to find any other pretext for this behavior than the obvious one. And as I say, we can't be absolutely certain about any of this until we have more facts than are available to us at the moment. But it seems safe to say that their background, their pattern of behavior, and even statements reportedly that they made in the course of hijacking a car speak to the fact that they knew exactly what they were doing. It was done deliberately and for the purpose, I believe, of fulfilling their duty to Allah pursuant to Sharia, namely jihad.
Frank, you mentioned that these two young men attended a mosque in Boston that's a front for the Muslim Brotherhood. For those of our listeners and those watching online who don't know, explain who and what the Muslim Brotherhood is and what they believe.
The Muslim Brotherhood is a very important and very worrying organization. It has been in business since about 1928 in Egypt. It now operates in over 100 countries around the world, including the United States. Its explicit purpose is twofold: to impose this doctrine of Sharia, this brutally repressive, women-hating, anti-homosexual, anti-Semitic, repressive doctrine worldwide, and to create or recreate a government that would rule according to it, known as a caliphate. And they have been at this, as I say, since 1928. They've been here in the United States since at least 1963, when they created the first of a large and growing number of fronts called the Muslim Students Association. And interestingly enough, if you'd be inclined, and I don't think you would, but others might be, to sort of poo-poo all of this, here's an interesting fact. The Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, a country that is very much in the news these days because of what is happening to it under the Brotherhood's Sharia adherent agenda, was recruited into the Muslim Brotherhood by the Muslim Students Association chapter at the University of Southern California. So think about the strategic consequences of that. You get a sense of what it means that these guys are here and doing what they're doing. And this mosque in Boston called the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center, I think it's further Philip is, has for years been identified with the Muslim Brotherhood. There's a group called the Muslim American Society, or MAS, that has been identified in federal court as the overt arm of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. That's their mosque. I believe they've actually got two, a very large facility, the largest in the east coast of the United States, I'm told, in Roxbury, that the government of Boston helped them build, subsidized in effect. And the governor of Massachusetts, much in the news these days, Patrick Duvall, has reached out to repeatedly. There's a very powerful video on this subject if people are interested. I think it's not quite up on our website yet at securefreedom.org, but we will have it there shortly. Produced by a group called Americans for Peace and Tolerance, based in Boston, that talks about the jihadism of this organization, its ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, and the fact that it has indeed been promoting both Sharia and sort of jihadist activity for many years.
Did I understand you right? Did you say that the current president of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, that he was recruited into the Muslim Brotherhood at the University of Southern California?
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that the Muslim Brotherhood promoting president of Egypt was recruited into that radical form of Islam here in the United States.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, just a key point here, because I think we've got to be clear about our terms. A lot of use is made of this word radical and radicalization and self-radicalization. The truth of the matter is, and I know you're aware of this, of course, and I hope your audience is, what we're talking about when we talk about this doctrine of Sharia is actually the orthodoxy of Islam. It is the mainstream view of Islam. But as you said, lots of Muslims all over the world, including in this country, don't adhere to it that way. Unfortunately, are not trying to impose it on the rest of us. But those who do are, and pose a mortal threat to us. And whether they're doing it through, the overt, violent kinds of attacks that we've been witnessing here and elsewhere, or whether it's the stealthy version, the civilization jihad that the Muslim Brotherhood favors until such time as it's strong enough to use violence against us. This is a part of the larger agenda of forcing all of us to submit to Sharia and all that goes with it.
Talking to Frank Gaffney, the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. You can go to their website, centerforsecuritypolicy.org. How do we tell the peaceful Muslims from the jihadist Muslims?
Boy, that's a great question. It's made much, much more difficult by a practice that is called in Arabic taqiyya, which essentially translates into lying for the faith. And according to this principle, under Sharia, it is not only permissible for adherents to this doctrine to lie, it is obligatory. So you're going to find in dealing with many of these Islamists, particularly of the Muslim Brotherhood stripe, that they seem to be extraordinarily friendly. In fact, the former FBI officer, who's a friend of mine, says they're always the nicest people in the room. They will lie straight to your face about what they believe and what Sharia is, and that jihad really means just personal struggle. It doesn't have anything to do with holy war and the like. So this complicates very much the question. There are ways that you can identify Sharia adherent Muslims, some of them in how they comport themselves, and often a test question. For example, do you believe Sharia is consistent with the Constitution of the United States? Now, they may lie to you and say, oh, of course it is, knowing full well that it isn't. Or they may simply not know. They may not know the truth. But my experience has been basically, if you're dealing with somebody who has any kind of prominence in the Muslim American